So let's start, okay, by reading this together. So I'll just point my arrow. Okay, ready? According. Whoa. Okay, so let's talk about this. So most of our class today, most of our class today is focused on visual organization. So visual, and here's our purpose. I can explain principles of visual organization and interpretation. So we're going to be looking at grouping principles and then depth perception. And then we're going to do an activity where you're going to go and take pictures of different things that you see that demonstrate these concepts. Okay. And then when you come back, you'll work on applying that and kind of filling it into a form. And then we're going to talk about size constancy or just perceptual constancy. Okay. So looking at things like that strawberry picture. So with visual organization, the first concept we need to look at is called Gestalt theory. So I've mentioned this before, and I know some of you have said things that are very similar to this, that our brain likes to fill in gaps. Okay, so Gestalt theory is that our brain likes things as a meaningful whole. So when we read, do we really read each individual letter? No. Okay, we read the whole word. And think about that. How many of you have gotten a paperback that you've written and you have a really silly spelling mistake? Okay, and you've edited your paper and you've read it. It's just because especially once you reread your paper several times, you're going to just be skipping over that word or that letter that's misspelled. Okay, so the brain creates a meaningful whole, and an example here is that mixed up reading that we just did. So we're going to be looking first at how our brain perceives images as a meaningful whole. So here you probably have seen something like this, okay, with the vase. What else do you see? Okay, and then, yeah, a cup and two faces. And then here, I love this one. Okay, and then what do you see here? Okay, so who first in this picture? Just raise your hand. Who saw the woman first? Okay, who saw the man playing the saxophone first? Okay, there's really no meaning like what you saw first. It's just what happened to pop out. Okay, so that's what we're looking at, and we like to create that meaningful whole. We see a whole woman's face, even though it's kind of cut off on the right side. Okay, so that brings us to talking about the first concept with Gestalt theory, which is going to be, oops, this is the next one. So what do you see here? So again, the cube stands out to us. Okay, now we don't actually, I mean, it's not a cube, but doesn't it look like to you in between here that those are almost a brighter white than the white from the background? That's our brain doing that and filling in the gaps. Okay, so now we can get to something called figure ground. So the figure ground is going to be where the figures stand out from the background. Okay, so the pictures I just showed you, especially, let's talk about the woman or the saxophone player. And what we're looking at with the woman and the saxophone player is that if you're staring at the saxophone player, that's the figure. The woman would be the background. If you see the woman, the saxophone or the black part will be the background. Okay, so figure ground is when figures stand out from the background. And I have some cool images here to show you, and some of them are logos that actually utilize figure ground. So here's the first part. Okay, so when you stare at the white, what are the white figures? Yeah, the arrows. And when you stare at the black, what are the figures? Yeah, people, does it look like they're walking downstairs or? Okay, yes, their legs are definitely concerning. Okay, so that kind of changes. Now, this next one, I'm sure some of you have seen. What's hidden in the FedEx logo? The, the arrow. Now you can't unsee it. So every time you see a FedEx anything, okay, you are all going to be that person now. You're going to tell everyone, did you know there's an arrow in the FedEx logo? Did you know that? Okay. And then here. Yeah, the M and the B. I think, in my opinion, this is the greatest sports logo that's ever been created. It is. So the M and the B, the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know if they did it on purpose. Okay. So these are some examples of figure ground. Okay. The next part we're going to look at, and this is where you'll be taking some pictures with our activity. So here are grouping principles. So when we look at, again, our brain, okay, especially with Gestalt theory, not only do we like a meaningful whole, but our brain wants to organize it in the most simple way possible. Okay, so when we look at grouping principles, okay, this is organizing figures into meaningful groups because it's less for our brain to process. So rather than organize 29 students in here, I have 8 groups. Okay, that's how my brain's going to organize it. Okay, just based on how you're sitting. Okay, so that would be, again, organizing it into a meaningful group. It's the simplest way possible. Now, when we do this, what I'd like you to do is draw, okay, what we see. I think the drawing is a little bit more powerful than the definition, which is why I don't have definitions for this. So we'll do it, we'll draw it, and then we'll apply it, and then you'll apply it again. So the first grouping principle is proximity. So with these lines here, does it look like 6 individual lines or almost like 3 stripes? Yeah, so all with this, the stripes are a little bit closer, okay? So the pairs of stripes are a little bit closer, okay, than it is to, like, the 1 and 2 are close, 2 and 3 are not. Okay, so our brain, even though it's 6 separate lines, puts that together as 3 stripes. I would draw just 6 lines with each pair a little bit closer to each other, just so you can see that just being closer to one another, we have a group. So I could explain proximity in here because you're sitting at a table. Okay, so because you're sitting at a table, that's proximity. That's how I'm grouping you together. The next one, I think, is similarity. It is. Okay, so similarity, do we view these in columns or rows? Yeah, our brain organizes it by a column of triangles, a column of circles, and a column of triangles because we're grouping things based on how similar they are. So the next one might be kind of hard to draw, but we'll try. It's closure. So what stands out to you in that image? Yeah, it's a triangle. And again, to me, it looks brighter white than the background, and it does look like there's actual lines there. Okay, so when we're looking at this, that closure, our brain wants to close that into one triangle, okay, instead of 3 separate circles. Okay, so it's closing the lines that aren't necessarily there. Then the fourth one is continuity. So for continuity, what happens is our eyes follow these lines. So even though it's going through another line, we still perceive it to be continuous. We perceive this wavy line to be continuous because our brain is going to follow that. And then finally, we have connectedness. Okay, so we see these almost like 3 barbells instead of 6 circles and 3 lines. So let's take a look at this next picture, and I want you to talk at your tables about different grouping principles that you see, and then I'm going to randomly call on you. Okay, so make sure you have a grouping principle. So in this picture, again, I'm off. Okay, so grouping principles can lead us astray. Okay, so what's going on in this picture? How is the dog on the grass but up in the roof? Don't know. But it's messing with our depth because this piece actually comes in front of this piece. And then this one's the really annoying one, this next one. Yes, they were laying on the ground. The two-pronged trident. Okay, so here's the grouping principles. So what I'd like you to do is talk with your tables about the grouping principles you just saw and how you might group images in this picture. Okay, I'll give you about a minute. Thank you. Hey, I can relate, by the way. Okay. Okay. Olivia, what's one grouping principle your group talked about? Similarity where? Like their what are they called? Their species? Yes. Okay. All right, Bebby, did you have another one with your group? Okay. So the fish that are closer together, you tend to group even if they're not necessarily similar. Okay, so this fish here might be a group, and then this might be a group. Okay. Anybody else want to volunteer one that they saw? Anybody do connectedness with the whatever this is, the grass, the weeds? Thank you, seaweed. I was having a retrieval error there. Okay, so the connectedness, perhaps. Okay, could be something there as well. Okay, so those are some of the things. So what you'll do when we do our activity, you're going to go take pictures. You need to look for things that are grouped together or create something that's grouped together based on 3 of the 5 principles. So the next part we're going to look at is number 2, depth perception. Okay. And the first part of depth perception we're going to talk about are binocular cues. And what we have to remember with binocular is that there are 2 eyes. So with binocular cues, there are two eyes and there are two cues. The first one is retinal disparity. Okay, how many of you have tried this before? Has anybody tried it? Okay, so what you have to do is you have to put both of your fingers in front of your eyes and then just kind of move them around a little bit until you see that third floating finger that doesn't really appear attached. So kind of, if you look at me, okay, so it's about right here, okay, that I see just a floating finger. Okay, so here's what retinal disparity is, okay, because I don't have the definition up here. What retinal disparity is that the images in our retina differ. Okay, so the images in our retinas differ. Our eyes are about 2 to 3 inches apart. Okay, so the images differ in our retinas. And here's the other part to know. The closer it is, the more it differs. Okay, so the closer an object is, the more it differs. So that's how we can tell depth. So when we did this floating finger, your eyes, okay, are receiving two different images. So it creates this illusion of kind of a floating finger because your brain's piecing together that information. Okay, the next binocular cue is called convergence. And here's the definition of convergence: crossing your eyes. Okay, crossing your eyes. So this is something, okay, that I think we underestimate the importance of. Okay, so something that my friend's two daughters were having a hard time learning to read, okay, and they were in reading intervention. Found out that neither of them could cross their eyes properly. So they couldn't see the words. It had nothing to do with ability. They physically could not see the words. So the one was a little bit worse. So everything was like double vision when she was trying to read. So her eyes weren't crossing. It was like a convergence deficiency. So they both went to vision therapy to help them learn essentially how to cross their eyes, especially as images got closer. They got glasses. One of them still wears them. The other one doesn't need them anymore. But now they picked up reading really fast. Think about kids who are having learning difficulties because they can't see the words, and then they're getting these other interventions. So that is something that is definitely a disorder. Okay, so the next one we're going to watch, okay, I'm just going to pause this for... Where is...